Welcome, everyone. Today's SoundPath panel presented by AIR is the power of collectives. And today we'll be exploring the benefits of community and collaboration. I'm Casper from AIR. If you're not familiar with AIR, we're an organization of independents who make audio. We have a very large community and offer lots of webinars like this, also classes, community events. So if you haven't checked us out yet, I'll drop a link in the chat and would love to see you at future events. We have a lot of things coming up. So fall is in full swing right now. But we will focus on today's session. Today we have an amazing panel who will be talking about the power of collectives, and Sheba will be moderating it. So I will pass it over to Sheba. And like I said, I'll be in the chat for support. And if you have any questions, please drop them in that Q&A box and we'll get to them during the Q&A. All right, I'll pass it to you, Sheba.
Thank you. Before we get started on the panel and the discussion part, I wanted to play, and give me just a second, but I wanted to play an audio clip that is from the Podglomerate, the Podglomerate's podcast. However, this is a clip that is from them that is not on the episode itself. So they were so gracious to let me use it. So definitely check out the full episode. It's with Leah Race Dennis, who is the head of podcasts at Odyssey. She does a really good conversation with Jeff Umbro, who's the CEO of Podglomerate. And especially with this podcast, especially near the end of the podcast, she has some really cool tips that if you as an independent can begin to incorporate in your independent practice, it could be a really good way to stand out in the industry. So definitely check out the full episode, but here is the clip that I wanted to play for you that's a little behind the scenes exclusive for you guys.
If you could give one piece of advice to indie podcasters, what would it be?
Do it yourself for as long as possible. I think partnering with a network can be really powerful, but it never makes sense to rush that move.
And the reason that I wanted to play that was as a head of a podcast network, she has insights of what she's looking for and things like that. But what I wanted to point out with this collective is that doing it alone does not mean doing it by yourself, that there are ways to join in community and bridge collaborations with others so that you could feel connected and you don't have to do it alone, So for the first question, I would love to jump into this conversation by everybody on the panel introducing themselves, sharing what show that they have, as well as when they started their collective and how that came about. Did the show come about first? Did the collective come about? How is that? And we'll start with Paulette, and we'll go from newest to oldest collective, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Paulette Arado. I'm the founder of Latinas in Podcasting, which it's great to see Teresa Gonzalez here because she was there for the nexus of this collective, which has very little to do with my podcast directly, other than I am a Latina podcaster. The name of the podcast is in Spanish, La Vida Más Chévere de Child-Free Latinas. And so it's about talking about all the toxic traits in our culture, which I guess could be tied to Latinas in podcasting, because that was born out of the fact that there are very few of us when I go to podcasting conferences. I met Teresa Gonzalez of Latinas from the Block to the Boardroom at the very first podcasting conference I went to here in Los Angeles. And I thought, by virtue of the fact that the name of the city is in Spanish and such a huge population of Latin American people live here, we would see more of us. And that was disappointingly not the case. So 3 years later, here we are with Latinas in Podcasting. We just started last year, and it was on the backbone of our virtual summit, which happened for the first time last October, and we'll be back this October. It's a free event for podcasters who feel marginalized, unseen, and unheard.
Am I up next? Okay. Sorry. My name's Corey Gums. I'm the founder of the Black Podcast Association. I don't have a show yet. I actually started and got into podcasting with developing a show with a friend, but that fell through. And I decided my background is in music and audio, so I kind of wanted to be behind the scenes, and I started with a mobile podcast for studio right before COVID hit New York City. So that kind of just blew up in my face. But at the same time, I started my Facebook group, which wound up turning into the Black Podcast Association. So here we are 4 or 5 years later as an organization of over almost 300 members. And it's been a great experience. The goal was, it started with a friend challenging me about me complaining about just the experience I was seeing and hearing from fellow Black podcasters in regards to how they, their voices being, not necessarily being heard, having the code switch and stuff like that. So I just wanted to create a space that we can come and be ourselves and have discussions in regards to what our needs were, and it has turned into this crazy idea and a wonderful thing. And I see Latrice in the comment section. Shout out to Latrice, because I wouldn't be here without her help and support over the years. So that's where I'm at. But I am going to be rolling out some shows next year. I'm working on some stuff right now, so I'll have a show and I'll be cool like everybody else.
Tamar.
Yeah, having a show makes you pretty darn cool in this podcasting oversaturation market. My name is Tamar Avishai. I am the producer of The Lonely Palette. I founded that show in 2016. It's an art history podcast for anybody who thinks that you can't make audio about art. You can. But the Lonely Palette the Hub and Spoke, I co-founded in 2017 with, it started with just two other shows, Ministry of Ideas and Soonish, and we were all shows that had kind of launched around the same time. We were all living in Boston at the time, and there was a monthly podcast like potluck that at the time was mostly BUR and GBH producers and those of us who kind of deeply wanted to be a part of that scene, but weren't really sure how to do that at the same time as podcasting was becoming a thing. And so, we weren't really sure where we stood in the world of public media. And I was at this potluck and kind of, Somerville, Massachusetts apartment, so it's very small. And I was crushed up against a window with Wade, who turned out to be the other co-founder of Hub and Spoke, because we were both like, yeah, we're both launching these shows. We're not sure kind of who we are in this industry. We just know that we really want to make great work. And so the two of us were kind of like, let's do something together. Like, let's just be a little less lonely, because this is a pretty lonely business. You work inside a closet and, you put stuff out there that you hope people will listen to, but you never actually, even if you see high download numbers, if you're lucky enough to see that, you still have no sense, you're still alone in your office or in your closet. And there was something really, powerful, to borrow a word from the title of this panel, to just know that you had people who were, you were all kind of like taking the machete and trying to find your way through the jungle together. And so we started Hub and Spoke really as kind of a group of friends who were looking to support each other, cross promote. It was a different time in podcasting in 2017 when everything was just going up and up and everyone was so creative and collaborative. And there just weren't as many shows. So I guess to kind of bring back to my initial little joke. And so when we started, we just had no sense of what it was going to become. And all these years later, as the industry has waxed and waned and money has come and money is gone, to have a group of podcasts who are really, really focused on independence and just focusing on their own show and excuse me, and knowing that we can put that energy into our shows and have this kind of larger net that's holding us together, seems to be kind of exactly what this industry is asking for right now.
I love that. Roxandra?
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Ruxandra, nickname Rex. Everyone knows me as Rex. And I'm from Venezuela, which makes me think Paulette's podcast name with the use of chévere makes me think you're from Venezuela as well. No? Okay, so chévere is widely used in Venezuela and Cuba and the Caribbean. Anyway, it's great to be here with y'all. I am definitely the most vintage in the group. I started out around 2000, 2025 years ago. Really not really thinking I would be a freelancer, but discovering that working independently was my jam pretty early on. And what I wanted to do was both work on like documentary audio for public radio. This is pre-podcast, obviously. And then also do long form magazine writing, feature writing internationally. And that's how I started working with my then boyfriend, who became my husband, Bear Guerra. He's a photographer. And we basically started collaborating pretty soon. Early on in my career, I felt the need and the kind of thrill of working steadily with someone else and like kind of riffing ideas of each other. And that kind of became Fonographia Collective, this idea of us working together and then identifying other folks to work with, whether it was in working in like a short documentary film or working on a series or finding, ways to package our stories, which we're mostly working in Latin America and here in the US-Mexico border. So that's really how our collective came to be, but it's really mostly really an excuse. I mean, I like what you said, Tamara, like, you want to make it less lonely. It was really an excuse to find some sort of vessel through which we can be like, for this project, it really shouldn't be the two of us. We should bring in like 3 other people. And we want to stay nimble and we want to have the freedom to apply for grants sometimes or work with a partner in government or work with an arts organization, all of those things we've done. And I feel that having us as kind of the core collaborators with the spirit of kind of bringing in people depending on the project, depending on their sensibilities or their different abilities, has really been kind of at the core of what we wanted to do. But pretty early on also, and now this is bringing us to the podcasting present, we always knew we weren't interested in starting a company or becoming a production company or growing in a way that this thing wouldn't be our own anymore. So I can get into more of that later, but we wanted to really hold on to to that spirit of collaboration first and foremost, and to knowing that we want to like grow along the way and pivot, right? Because having been doing this now for 25 years, sometimes I think my biggest strength as a storyteller is this kind of like ability to switch gears, right? I mean, no one imagined podcasts would have such a heyday, such a boom period, and then boom, just like that, collapse, right? Or seemingly collapse, at least for those of us who are employed in it, right? And so yeah, it's been a lot of pivoting and having this collective, this kind of definition, this vessel has been really great in helping us adapt to all those changes.
And what I love about what all of you guys said and like a little behind the scenes that we're going to get into is like all of these collectives take on different formats. And like talk about the formats that it takes as well as like how did you guys decide to structure yourselves? Because each of you guys do it very differently, and why you chose that. And we could kind of go the reverse order this time, I guess.
You want me to start again? Why I chose the collective? Why I
Well,
chose
because I think when we were talking one-on-one, you had mentioned about you started one way, but now you're an S Corp and it opened different, different pathways for you guys to like get get funding, get kind of different things. So like how did you guys decide which format to take, and like not just format in terms of like it being a collective, but also with like Paulette and Corey, who have events and who have like a group model, like a group membership model. So like talking about what those are across the different panelists. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I already talked about about this a bit, so I'll keep mine brief. But I guess we started working together and bringing in other people to collaborate with us. This is Bear and I, photographer, and at a time when already starting your own nonprofit was getting difficult. Initially, I thought, oh, we should be a nonprofit. But you know, you need a board, you need all kinds of like bureaucratic things that we weren't ready to do. We spent so much of our time out in the field and traveling. This is before having kids, and it just felt like a burden. And so, you know, this is more like technical, and I'm happy to talk more about this stuff if folks are interested. But we realized that starting an S Corp was a better way to kind of manage our finances, our projects, to be able to kind of present ourselves as a duo, as, you know, we're no longer just Rex and Bear, we're like Fonographia Collective, and get bigger gigs, bigger assignments, bigger projects, bigger collaborations than just being two individuals. And it also really simplified our taxes. So that's how we became an S Corp and not a nonprofit, and we did not stay as two individuals. But I would also add that, you know, I've always been interested in kind of like not being exclusive, not being exclusive to audio, not being exclusive to collaborating with Bear, or not being exclusive even to Fonographia Collective. So I'm a part of another collective, the Homelands Productions. I'm a part of different communities, I guess you could say, through which I work on different projects. I feel like for me, it's more about, well, feeling excited about working on a particular project, finding that shared excitement with someone else. And it's those personal connections that kind of draw me in different directions. So if I identify someone that I work well together and we're both like really passionate about something, we might like work repeatedly over time. And you know, having an S Corp gives me the flexibility to like bring them in, to pay them to get the bigger grants or get to raise money that way, and kind of like shift depending on the project. I hope that answers your question. But it's
Absolutely.
It's beyond podcasts, I would say.
I love that. And Tamar, you guys have Hub and Spoke has a nonprofit model. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can kind of get there through, you know, because there's the structure that we have now that we've kind of evolved once we realized that we were actually like a thing. And then there's what made us a thing in the first place. And, you know, again, it's like, I don't want every answer that I give to kind of start out with, well, it was a different time in podcasting in 2017, but there was definitely a sense that, independence was a liability at the time. And we felt like it's like we were these different shows, but it's like if you weren't connected to something, you know, if you weren't connected to a member station or some sort, you know, one of the big studios that was springing up, then you could come off as like an amateur. And so we wanted to kind of, you know, find other independent shows that we could show the world were just as high quality as anything that you might listen to, you know, on Saturday on the radio, or, you know, podcasts that might, you know, show up in the new and noteworthy on Apple Podcasts, but that we were independent and we just, you know, that was the whole mission from the beginning. And so what we did was I remember this so clearly. Remember the Bellow Collective, that newsletter, like the podcast newsletter, it had its like 100 best episodes of the year that they would release every December, and you know everyone would just kind of be waiting around like poised over Twitter, and we would look for whatever had independent under their name, and those would be the shows that we would go after. and say like, hey, do you want to kind of band together with us? Because on the one hand, like clearly independence is really important to you. It's important to us too, but we're going to do this total subversion of that and be this collective, so how do we be independence together, which, and we can get more into this, is really a contradiction. And that's, we've run into that. Like that's an important thing to keep aware of. So from there, we've grown. I said this, we had an annual meeting last week, and I said that it's like we started, we've been building our house room by room and figuring out how to best position ourselves so that we do the best for our shows, and we can take on all of these independent missions for all of these different shows and have some sort of superstructure over it that still honors what these shows, the priorities of these shows, because they're all going to have different priorities, and Hub and Spoke has to have some sort of priority as its own entity. And finding that relationship between the two, and responding to the changing podcasting landscape, external to our own shows. So we've been putting that structure together little by little. I'm not quite sure like how interesting that story is. We looked into getting nonprofit status. We realized it was, it would have been kind of more time and money than we wanted to give it. So we just got a fiscal sponsor and said, okay, like that's taken care of for that. And, we want to be able to fundraise for our shows and pay everybody. And, but then that would be like a corporate network that we are not. And so we kind of jettisoned that and thought, okay, well then who are we if we're not funding our shows? And really what we're doing is still creating community. Like community is still really, really important, and showing, like hoping that we can raise all boats with one tide, that shows, that just by being part of our collective, that we speak to the quality and the craft of all of the other shows, so that when somebody's just kind of like spinning the dial and looking for different podcasts, they can look at one of our shows and say, oh, okay, this is a Hub and Spoke show. Like I know what that means out in the world. And it took like a lot of work to arrive at that very simple, kind of like, this is a show worth listening to because it's part of this collective.
Cool. Corey?
So I'm gonna hop in. My structure for the BPA, for the Black Podcast Association, comes from my experience in the music industry. When I started, when I came up with the idea and I decided to go down this route, I knew I wanted to offer like a membership, paid membership, because in my mind, I feel like people value what they pay for. And it would also help me to use some of those funds to pay people to come and do trainings and stuff like that initially. But the structure that I used, because I didn't know what I was doing when I started this, it was just an idea, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I went with what I knew, which is following what in the music industry, like ASCAP, BMI. Back in the days when I was chasing my music dreams, being a member of ASCAP, they offered not only the publishing side of things, but they offered services and support that they would give to its members, like through workshops, like similar like to panels like these and stuff like that. So for me, that was the underlying architecture of what we were doing. It's evolved over the years as the needs, and I've learned more about running a community, but I like the paid membership model. It weeds out the people who are not serious about what not serious about what they want to do. It keeps people vested in, like I said, it makes them value what they're paying for. The biggest challenge I had with that was I didn't want to nickel and dime people. I didn't want to make it so expensive it was out of reach, but I wanted to make it affordable, because the whole purpose of the community was to invite people in to get support as a community from each other, as well as whatever I could bring to the community, but also bring an education arm to it. So I think for me, the structure is always going to be fluid because it's a living, like I consider it like a living thing where it changes and it evolves as the needs of the community changes. So you got to be able to pivot and provide different options, you know, and evolve as the industry evolves, right? And the needs of the community evolve. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I am. It's currently under my, from a corporation point of view, it's currently under my current LLC, but I'm actually in the process right now, uh, over these next couple of months, moving it to its own entity so that it can be, so it can survive without me. It's under my company. If I get, for any reason, I can't do anything anymore, or I decide to pivot, I want this thing to be able to live on its own and to grow and become whatever it's going to be in the future. I do have other things I want to do, so I do have an exit strategy at some point out of this, but that's and I think that's also part of how I create and structure the community so that it can survive and it can move on without my influence or without my, you know, my expertise in it. So it's been more of starting to empower more members and bringing more members into leadership positions inside of the community as well. So that's kind of how I structured it.
Okay, great. Paulette is having a fire drill type of situation in her apartment, so we're gonna skip her for now, but when she's back, let us know. But I can answer. She did mention, she just put this in the chat to us. They are a free collective, and for now, so we could hear more about that once she's back. And kind of to go a little bit backwards in terms of like the inspiration for this panel for me came from a panel that AIR did last year with Mia, Jamie, and Karf, who were from Mumble Media. And they did it. Mumble Media is a co-op that's owned, and the workers kind of own their co-op. And I kind of, the question that I had at the end of their panel, which was, they're kind of housed like a production, they're kind of structured like a production company. And I kind of had the question of like, can a co-op and like a community that is based on just like everybody kind of coming together, forming community, can it be structured in a way that's a little bit not in terms of a production house, but more in terms of a community? Can the same model exist, and would it make sense? And so talking to different people, I've kind of landed on us being a collective and talking about the collective, but so much has changed since that conversation, and so much has changed in the industry as well, from when you guys started, but also when we started having this conversation earlier in the springs. A lot has changed in terms of acquisitions and mergers, the layoffs, the closures. So kind of just like diving in a little bit deeper, like how is everybody feeling about the industry and what's going on, and like what's missing, you know? A lot of it, to be kind of vulnerable, when the mentions of Pineapple Street and Wondery closing down, I literally had a tear day. Like I was crying because those were companies that I looked up to and wanted to be a part of. And like one day when I make it in the industry, this is where I want to work at. And to be like, oh, those places are closing down, it kind of feels, you know, like it's sad, but it's also kind of like, what are we missing as an industry? And like, you know, I kind of have the belief that podcasting isn't going anywhere because the audience isn't going anywhere. Like the audience still exists, and we create with listeners in mind. You know, we're not just creating for ourselves. So, and we're also building for the communities and the voices and the stories that we are exposed to. So, and this could kind of, anybody could jump in. We could popcorn style it. So anybody jump in of like, how are you feeling? And kind of like what's missing? What do you kind of wish you could see in the industry going forward and stuff? And in the chat, feel free to respond to this question too. I'm not able to look at everybody's answers, but we would love to see it as well. Anybody could jump in.
I
Go ahead.
No, Corey, do you want to go ahead?
You can go.
All right. I mean, look, it's been a bloodbath, right? I mean, this is what we're all seeing. You know, we thought we knew as soon as you, like, for those of us who have little kids, it's like you think you know something, and then, you know, as soon as you get used to something, it's different. And you know, I think that there are a lot of reasons for this. You know, it's no one thing. We're just kind of seeing the outcome of a lot of different, you know, we're seeing a very hot political conversational climate. We're seeing the results of, like I said earlier, you know, kind of money coming in, stretching everything else out, diluting stuff, and then leaving. And so we're left with a lot of, you know, kind of stretched out, diluted stuff. And what we need, I think personally, you know, what we really need is to, you know, kind of get back to basics, like get back to what has made this mode of communication, this style of storytelling, this kind of sense of universal stories of humanity as told through these like specific people, you know, that has never been gone, and that's never going anywhere. It's just a question of how we try to build careers on top of it. And there's just been some like really bad ideas that came in and, you know, fucked shit up and left. So I think that this idea that like what is so powerful and resonant about the human voice and the way that people tell stories is what we need to get back to. And I'm just going to keep beating the drum. And of course, this is the right place to do it, for independence, where you don't have to be worried that what you say is going to not necessarily reflect both the viewpoints of the, you know, umbrella funding, you know, like the company that you work for, I think is really important, because a lot of stuff has been, like I said, kind of diluted, watered down, you know, kind of tried to access the most possible people without even saying very much. And we need to kind of get that element of like surprise and curiosity back into our craft. And I think we also have to be realistic about who we want our audience to be and who we are, you know, kind of leaving on the table, you know, like who we still want to reach, how we're going to heal this moment that we're in right now, if healing is indeed your MO, which is, it's not everybody's. But, you know, recognizing, you know, the importance of kind of accessing, you know, like reaching out to people who might have felt a little bit alienated from this kind of style of podcasting, which I personally think is very, very important. But again, you know, it's like, that's the thing about Hub and Spoke, is that we all have different priorities for our shows. But that has always been a priority for me, is to try to, I don't know, kind of find shared humanity reaching across the aisle a little bit. And also, you know, kind of recognizing, like finding the surprise in that, because that's what got me into public radio in the first place, is like, I would be really surprised at how good someone's story is who I had never bothered to listen to before.
If I can jump in here. Oh, Court, go ahead.
Well, you go right ahead. I can speak after.
Sorry, I had to jump off. There was apparently a fire in our building, but the fire department got here. I'm back. And the problem was that it's a very loud fire alarm that was going on the entire time. So sorry about that. I'm going to wrap my answer up in the last question, which is how is our collective structured? I actually have Corey to thank because he mentored me in creating this space. So thank you so much, Corey. He was generous with his time and with his resources in helping me build it. And we've taken a different route in that mine is not a paid collective. It is a free collective, but it's built on the ethos of connect, collaborate, and launch. Connect, collaborate, and grow. And the theme for this year's event is build your podcast, grow your legacy, or grow your podcast, build your legacy, because we're here for the long term. And especially right now in the current day and age, when people who look like us are being targeted, it is the safe space for people who need to feel like their voices aren't going to get them in trouble. Like they're not going to be fired from their jobs for saying the wrong thing because it isn't in line with what everybody around them wants them to say. And that is a very hard thing to do. It was a hard thing to do before. It's a harder thing to do now. And so our collective, our space, our events are structured around giving people permission. They don't need permission, but sometimes we feel as humans that unless we're given a little push, maybe we shouldn't do the thing. And I try to remind our people that, and when I say our people, I mean our members, that we are continuing on, like Tamar said, the tradition of our ancestors. We are carrying on this way of passing on knowledge. We're mostly audio first. There are, of course, some video podcasters out there. But before there was TV, before there was written word, the way we passed information on was through oral storytelling. And we cannot let that die. We cannot let that be silenced. So no matter how you get it out there, get it out there. If your voice isn't the strongest instrument for you to play, maybe your writing is, maybe memeing is, memes have been elevated to an art form everyone understands. And so the whole point of Latinas in podcasting is to get us to connect, to collaborate, and feel safe. And the connection and the collaboration is about negating competition. Like, we don't need to compete for pieces of the pie. There's an infinite amount of pie. The consolidation of the industry is a cycle. It's not going to be forever. It's going to change, but it's also going to challenge us to continue to find ways to collaborate as opposed to competing. And I would hope that for people who are watching this, instead of taking the leap into podcasting or trying to grow your legacy through podcasting, that you remember that it is easier to work as a team. Many hands make light work is a saying for a reason, than it is to compete alone.
I mean, you basically, first of all, thank you, Paula. All I did was answer some questions, but I appreciate that.
He answered questions for 2 hours, people. He gave me a lot of his time.
Look, when I'm gonna come with a different perspective, because like I kind of knew it was coming. When you start seeing, and I always use the late 90s, early 2000s as my basis. When I started seeing all this money being thrown at companies and companies being brought into these ecosystems, especially these tech companies, their model is to let you run for a couple of years, and then they absorb you into their ecosystem, right? And then basically, it disappears. And that was me and my friend. That was our strategy with an app we were trying to build, which was get it to a certain point, let one of these companies buy it, let them absorb it. You do a non-compete for a couple of years, you get a salary for 3 to 5 years, you come up with another app and you watch first repeat. So when I started seeing the tech companies throwing money like Amazon and all these different companies saying they're buying up ownership level of these companies, I was like, there's going to come a point where there's going to be a consolidation. And I think we have to really acknowledge that COVID kind of like was like an anomaly and really sped up. Now, I'm probably the most rookiest person on this panel when it comes to the business side of things, because I still consider myself a student and I'm learning a lot as I'm building my community. But anytime I see a large influx of money just being thrown around, that's usually a sign that the bubble's eventually going to pop. And I used to have conversations when we were a Facebook group, and that's the group like telling people, get your money, but protect your IP, protect your companies, don't sign papers, speak to a lawyer, make sure that you're not giving away everything just because you're getting a check for amount of money you've never seen, in one time in your whole entire life. And these companies, that's just their strategy is to put, $1 million cash on the table to make you make bad decisions. So for me, that was part of my mission with the Black Podcast Association, was providing, like Paulette, we have internal conversations that that probably we couldn't have outside of it without people being penalized or ostracized for their viewpoints. But it was also, as a collective, coming together and educating each other and having discussions with each other about what we're seeing, and making sure that, because we have people of all levels of experience, people of all different backgrounds in our community that could offer their insights and advice to make sure you're not making a bad decision if you are presented an opportunity to sell your company. So I think we as an industry have a real serious problem with our business model. We've adopted the radio and music industry. I mean, basically, and you can correct me in the comments, and if you want to speak about it, but I see a lot of the podcasting as 360 deals in the music industry, which are complete, it's just crazy. And I think what you're seeing is when all this money is being thrown around, everybody thinks it can be replicated in a space that I don't think anybody really understood. And back to what Tamara's saying was with the independent side. And I strongly believe, if the industry continues to ignore the independent voices in this space, it's the collapse. We haven't even seen a collapse yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to add. Y'all said such smart things. I guess riffing off of what you just said, Corey, I really encourage us to think about the work on one hand and the money. Those two don't have to meet. There's no reason why we should get paid for great ideas. Really, I mean, speaking of the art world and how artists operate in the world, oftentimes many of us have to do the work, the weird shit that we feel proud of, the thing that we want to see out in the world, not the one that Sony's going to come in and pay a shit ton of money for, but the things we want to make, we have to hustle to figure out how to pay for them. And I try to be very clear with myself whenever I come up with an idea, when I, meet up with somebody and it's oh, let's make this thing. Am I doing this for money? Excuse me, or am I doing it because it's nagging at me and I feel strongly about it and I feel I'm the best person to do this story, or someone else is the best person to do this story? And so going back to what I was talking about, the S-Corp, and a bunch of you had questions about the S-Corp, it's really just a way to kind of help me take care of the business side of things, because I'm horrible at business. I'm horrible at money. I have to put an alert in my calendar every month that's invoice everybody, because if I don't do that, I forget. And trust me, I'm not rich or anything, but I hate thinking and talking about money. It's difficult for me. I'm an idealistic, space cadet. And so I don't know, I try to be very clear about it, and I'm under no illusions that the kind of work I want to see out in the world, the kind of work I consume, I listen to, I read, I watch, the kind of stuff I'd like to be making, no one is going to throw money at. And so during that podcasting boom, I also, like you, Corey, I felt this thing is going to blow up. It's going to blow up. It's it can't keep growing at this rate. And we can't have another true crime or another self-help podcast, chat podcast. Apparently I was wrong, but then eventually, right, it all came down. So I don't know. I think what we need to do at this time is honestly support each other, not be competitive, think about ways that we can be more ambitious with our ideas by coming together, whether it's to raise the money or to make the thing in our own time, and make weird shit, because that stuff is never going to be commercial. It just isn't. It wasn't before, it ain't going to be in the future. And so it helps to be very clear in our minds about where do we stand, we're talking profit profit making ventures, that's something else than like what, and my mind is blanking right now, but that weird, great little podcast that they made out of the BBC, at the BBC, that was recently canceled. That was all experimental audio, forgive me. Shortcuts, thank you. So anyway, there's a time and a place for all this stuff. But I'd like to see us leaning more into doing those things that we've been thinking and wanting to do for a long time that we didn't have money for before, and we might not ever. We just have to go and make it. So that's what I have to add.
And I'm going to jump in a little bit of like, from a marketing standpoint, like looking at, you know, all of these industry reports and things that come out of like, you know, the industry is growing, the audiences are growing, they're diverse, and they make X amount of money, and all of this like power and potential. Like there's a part of me as a marketer that kind of wonders, because I also am a producer and I like to create stories as well. So there's a part of me that wonders of like, even as an independent, is there a way to like, and I kind of have been looking for this. I haven't been able to find it. If anybody in the audience knows an example of this, let me know. But somebody who's kind of like collectively stacked their way up to success, of like not just being a part of one collective, but being a part of multiple collectives. Rux, you mentioned a couple of, you're part of a couple of collectives. Totally go into that of like, how does that, something like that work, as well as from a marketing standpoint. I'm curious if any of you guys have, with the people that you've worked with the members of your collectives, and even with their shows that they create and like the audiences that they serve, has anybody done like a group survey, a group, you know, kind of like a feedback form where they've gotten the information from their audiences that they could use and like leverage across the industry? Because it's like, to say that there aren't, you know, like, yes, we're creating, and yes, we all have audiences, and like, you know, even for the art of it, like we watch multiple things. We watch silly like YouTube videos just for the simplicity of it. It's sometimes it's, you know, great documentaries, sometimes it's like silly stuff, but like, you know, with that audience behavior, kind of like being able to consume different kind of content, different kind of stuff, like an audience member will still be able to connect with a lot of those things. So is there a way, as a collective, as, you know, creators, that as a group you could also, you know, kind of use the power of your audience to leverage and grow, you know, and stack it across like multiple communities, multiple groups, and like be collaborative? Go ahead, Corey.
I you know, I have the Black Podcast Association, but I also look at the collaborations I do as a bigger, broader collective, right? And my goal is, you know, it was mentioned, I think Paulette said earlier, like the pie is big enough for everybody to get a piece of. We love to hear how many billions of dollars ad revenue is going to make in this space, and you know, whatever. We can have that conversation about who's getting a piece of that pie, but this, I always look at it, there's always money to be made in it, and collectively we can all get a piece of it. I'd rather get 10% of $100,000 than no percent of $100,000. So that's how I kind of operate. But I feel like since we're a lot of us are in the same boat, and it doesn't make sense to compete. So I'm always out looking to collaborate, and actually going to be working on some things for 2026 where I'm going to be even more collaborative, and be reaching. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because now I know some collectives that I can actually reach out with some of the ideas that I want to do, considering the news that has been happening recently. But I think it's important I always encourage podcasters to collaborate with themselves, but also encourage organizations and businesses to collaborate with each other as well. It's a great exchange of ideas. It's a great way to utilize each other's resources. It's a great way to spread the cost of resources out. And I think for the future of the industry, that's going to help dictate. That's going to help at least dictate a portion of the industry and show the industry that collectively there's a voice. There's one voice that needs to be listened to. And if it's not going to be listened to, then it's a big enough voice that says, well, we'll just go do our own thing and make something happen on the outside. And I think that's the challenge, is that a lot of people are looking at how the industry is now and not looking at it from a long-term goal. Like, how can we collectively come together to redefine it and make it beneficial to the independent voices and the people that we represent, to ensure that there's some form of equality, there's some form of shared resources, income, that everybody is eating and everybody's getting a chance to reach their goals. I think the problem with that is that that's the long game. That's the hard work part, right? Trying to figure out what's a new business, what's a new revenue model, that works for this side of the industry. What is, who's gonna spearhead it? Who's gonna put the time and effort when we all have our own personal lives and our own projects? Like, it's not an easy task. But I think that's why having collective is even more important, a collective body of collectives and more collectives, right? Because then you can break it down into parts, and you can break it down and make it more like like Voltron, where everybody just comes together and forms this one colossus thing. So, and that's something I've been thinking about very deeply these past couple of months, and just trying to figure out, having conversations behind the scenes with people, just trying to figure out how can we move in this direction, and just encourage people to look for the gaps and try to figure out how we can solve some of these problems that we're facing now and in the future.
To Corey's point, collaborating with Corey is what got me Latinas in podcasting. Collaborating within Latinas in podcasting got me a board of advisors. That board of advisors helped create the second round of the Latinas in Podcasting Virtual Summit. It's so baked into how we just approach life, I think. And maybe this is a cultural thing. I mean, Rex and Corey, you can weigh in on whether or not, but it's about bringing people to the table. And, we're taught at the very beginning of our podcasting careers that you get on other people's shows to use their audience to grow your own influence, right? So it's the same kind of thing. We work with one another within these collectives, and it's so great to have met Tamar and Rex through this, because I didn't know about them or their collectives before, and now we can help grow both of our influences in a larger way than we could have alone. And I think that's what it goes back to. There's just some truths to succeeding in life, and one of them is that collaboration is at the center of it.
I'll just weigh in what you said about the culture part. I think it is a culture thing, especially coming from our communities, since we're kind of marginalized and in the negative connotation, the negative stereotypes and stuff. You learn to use your communities to survive, right, and to figure out how to make it. When I started the BPA, one of my first iterations of why we existed was my concern was seeing like how people of color were influential in building the movie industry, the TV industry, the music industry. And when I'll use the music industry because I was in it at this time, where in the mid 90s, where the music industry was suffering from lack of sales, and hip hop was starting to hit its pinnacle. And I remember in the mid 90s, it was hip hop and the country music space that kept the music business afloat and kept it from collapsing. So it was like, while hip hop wasn't supposed to last as long as it did, and all the gatekeeping that was happening, here we had a space where now it's bringing in all this money, and it hasn't stopped since in the past 30 plus years. It's like they gatekeep until they exhaust all their avenues. And my concern was, okay, in the podcast industry, all this money's starting to get thrown in there. They're gonna gatekeep. It's going to be gatekept until it's exhausted, while we're out here figuring out how to survive and make money in the most creative ways. And then the eyes are going to turn to us. And I just wanted to make sure the members of my organization were in a position so that when the eyes were turned on them, they were prepared to not sit at the table, but say you're coming to sit at my table, and have a little bit more negotiating power, a little bit more power in regards to the conversation that happens when it comes to the money aspect. So that's kind of that's kind of what my attitude was. But culturally, like, that's survival, right? We turn it to our communities for survival. That's the gangs of New York in the early 70s, you know, when you had that, when they were going through their economic collapse. That's how some of these neighborhoods survived. So I use a lot of that stuff and bring it to like what I've learned and reading and just seeing and experiencing my own journey, bring that to what I'm doing here. So that's I think I think it is for some of our organizations, it is a cultural thing, and I also I'm cautious about it because sometimes I feel like it's expected of us to do these kind of things, and that creates a whole nother series of I'm trying to watch my words here of stereotypes and biases and prejudices. So we got to, you know, sometimes I'm concerned about that too when I'm thinking about our community and what we're doing.
I think you bring up a really important point, Corey, and that is that the spirit of collaboration, of forming collectives. And at one point someone asked, so how do you define a collective? It's not like it's the one thing that gets the seal of approval and all collectives look the same, or all collectives are about making money, or all collectives happen to be in the same physical space. It's really just like finding other folks who you want to work with and whom you have a shared sensibility with and commitment to the work. But I think this idea of being up against gatekeeping is real, you know, like most of us in this room, probably everyone on this call, like one way or another has found themselves outside, knocking on a door and not really, you know, getting any answers or insights into how to get in. But eventually, if you're stubborn enough and you're committed and you work, you know, you work hard, you collaborate with others, scratch other people's backs, they scratch yours, you find your way in. And then the question is like, what are you going to do to keep that door open for other folks? And you know, if you have these relationships, you have these collectives, whatever you want to call them, you know, the idea is that like you really bring in other folks and like you open up the way for diversifying. I hate that term, but really bringing in all kinds of folks into the industry. And podcasting, it was wild just to see over that time that we saw it be so flush. There was an opening up of the industry to producers of color, to different kinds of stories, to long form storytelling, to all kinds of things that we never imagined possible. And I hate to sound like, let me tell you about what it was like when I started out. But really, you know, when I started out around 2000, 2002, oh my gosh, you know, the sexism, the discriminatory practices were way more rampant than even now during Trump 2.0. So I don't know. I think like there's real responsibility in figuring out what it takes to stay in it in the long run and to then hold that door open for others. But I'm under no illusions that it's easy, nor that this era right now is really gonna wear many of us out. You know, like day to day, I just think a lot about like, what can I do today, or what am I able to do today to keep the faith in this thing that I do? Because we're living through really demoralizing times, you know, podcasting bubble busting aside, you know. So yeah.
Very true. Podcasting is art, and content creation is art, and art is impacted by the environment in which it is created. And so, sure, podcasting is going to go through challenges, just as in real life we're going through challenges. Those two things cannot be divorced from one another. And it's you know, we just, to Rex's point, I feel like part of the benefit of being in a collective is being able to lean on the people around you. Even as the community leader, you still need people around you for support. You know, I need to be able to lean on my community when stuff is hard. I had 2 back-to-back webinars today. And some of my members are in both. It's a wonderful rally of support. But you know, that's easy. It's when I have 17 projects lined up. Who can I help? Who can help me here? Who can I delegate to? You know, and even asking for support can be hard for some of us who are just like, got to do it all myself, you know, eldest daughter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. But remembering that we created communities, we have communities, so we can be in community too.
Okay. I think I want to, I love what everybody said. Like, I love that you all are part of this conversation. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and like, having this publicly with me. So thank you so much. I want to, looking at the time, I do want to definitely, look at the Q&As. So first question, goes to Tamar. How are the shows funded or paid for if you don't fundraise? Is there a collective effort there?
I apologize. The yard work just started outside my house, so I hope you can't hear that. Well, so everybody is pretty much responsible for funding their own shows, and we try to have fundraisers that fund Hub and Spoke specifically. So, you know, we have our own overhead. We run a website. We have an administrator. We have branding and you know, things that just kind of we need on our back end to keep things going. But other than that, you know, what we invite shows in for is for the community of one another and the discoverability of one another. But we all have day jobs, you know, I mean, in audio, people are, you know, some people have managed to fund their own shows with big grants, other people through sponsorship, other people through crowdsourcing. You know, I produce a lot of other people's podcasts in order for me to be able to pay myself to produce my own. And, you know, Rex, you're talking about the importance of kind of like offbeat experimental storytelling that's kind of never going to get funded, but it's still like has to be made. And that's what we do. You know, this is a home for that. You know, we can't fund it any more than you know, Wondery, rest in peace, would have. But we can just kind of show the world by virtue of our existence that these are valuable stories to tell. And I think that they're only going to be, like I said, more valuable now that people are starting to, I don't know, there's like a lot of bravery that can come on the other side of despair. And it's like we can't go any lower from a business standpoint, so we might as well just make interesting stuff and see where that takes us. And I think that Hub and Spoke, like we all share that mission together.
And I think also Paulette and Corey, because you guys have different funding models and like you guys also deal with like sponsors for the events and stuff like that. What are some challenges or like how do you guys go about like what are you guys seeing in that space of like, you know, advertising and like funding for events and like, you know, all of that. All that goes into that.
I don't even know what that is. What are you talking about?
Okay.
what funding? I think I've been I well for me to be transparent, I won't say I have made a strong effort to secure sponsorship and funding for a lot of things that we do. A lot of it has come from when I do reach out for sponsorship, it's been through my own personal network. And I've been blessed to have people who want to support what we do. So when I do an ask, it's usually not a problem. But I also when I do events, I always feel like I can do more. I mean, I would always love to have a huge infusion of cash really to bring to vision, like bring to life what my vision is. But I work with what I have. And I think for me though, and this is probably going to change over the next next couple of months, is my attitude is kind of like, if I can't get the funding, I'm not going to just do something that's going to hurt the brand. I rather just cancel it or pivot it or figure out how to revamp it into a way that is more affordable and still can give the same experience that I'm trying to achieve with the people who attend it. I think sometimes I have conversations with myself and I think, like, is the term Black Podcasters Association a glass ceiling when it comes to seeking sponsorship or especially in this climate where people are just like all over the place with their prejudices and stuff. Sometimes I do question, like, is it a glass ceiling? Only because of sometimes the response or even like when people say they want to come to an event, they're like, "Hey, I thought it was only for Black people," and I'm like, "Well, you clearly didn't read the event description, because I say this is open to everyone in the industry, because a lot of things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring the industry to our community versus us always having to run to to these industry stuff. Like I think and I think that's important, that the industry starts to come to us versus us always going to it. Because I have wonderful people in our community. It's such a wonderful experience. People have such a great time. Last year, Podcast Movie, we did a meetup and people were coming up to me like, "Can I come?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is open to everybody. Like, I would love for you to come and sit down and get to meet these wonderful people that I know and learn about their projects and just learn about who they are as people," because that's where the collaborative, in my opinion, sometimes that's where the collaboration comes from, right? You realize you have common interests. You realize you might have opinions on Star Wars or Star Trek or something, and all of a sudden now you just became the best of friends, right? So like, it's almost kind of like breaking down these barriers and these walls. So I think next year, and part of my problem with running my community is I am now learning to delegate to people who are actually actively trying to help me make this a bigger thing, and relying on their expertise in it. So I think we're going to see a different philosophy and a different strategy in regards to getting sponsorship from us over the next couple of months and years to come. So that's where I'm at with it. But I'm also looking to look into within my own community, within the Black community, and find sponsors there, because there's a lot of alignment there for what we do in what we do with our community as well.
The Trekkie thing.
I
I'll
mean,
say that
my friends.
I know who your friends are. I have to say fundraising this year has been harder than it was last year. And this year I convened a board for that express purpose. It's all come down to the grassroots. Who are our members who can, with very low dollar amounts, we're talking $50, is how we are managing this beast. Last year, I crowdsourced from our mutual friend, the Trekkie. Her idea was to just go out to the people you know. See, I've been an event planner for 20 years. I'm not even 50, for 20 years, but I never had to do fundraising. So that's been a whole different dimension. And I'm not good at it, hence the board. But you know what the resounding response was? As people are rolling back DEI initiatives, the term, to Corey's point about the glass ceiling, Latinas in podcasting was not as attractive as one would have hoped had, again, back to our current reality, not been what it is. Is it just that? No, the economy sucks too. So, dollars are tight. So we had to pivot. We were looking at, a couple $100 versus 50 per person is what helps. And every single dollar amount adds to the pile. It compounds because it goes into a bank account that has interest as well. So I would say that it's been very discouraging to fundraise this year. Very discouraging. But that doesn't mean the work doesn't matter. That just means that the people with the money previously aren't able to do it. And I get that. So to Corey's point, we had to pivot. We had to pivot and create something else. And that doesn't diminish the value of the product. It's just that we are realistic.
Yeah. And this question is for everybody. What do you think is the next evolution of podcasting?
Can we talk about video podcasting?
I was gonna say.
Go ahead.
Everybody's faces. You know what I'm looking forward to is the eventual split and true definition of each pillar as a separate entity instead of the current situation where it's muddied because they're somehow competing against one another. I don't think it needs to be that way. And I'm also want everybody to pay attention to the fact about who's pushing video podcasting. The people with the vested interest in getting video content out of you. That's not necessarily the right move for everyone. Just like real estate agents telling you have to buy a house because you're throwing away money on rent is not true. Buying a house isn't for everyone, and you're not throwing away money on rent, you're keeping a roof up over your head. So that's my rant.
I'm going to age myself and say that I remember when you added video, it was a talk show. It was a video blog. So it's just a matter of somebody rebranding for the certain platforms, what they say. But what do I see? I don't know. And that's something that I'm always thinking about because it's constantly changing, and seems like every week we get either some good news or some doom news. One company's going out, or layoffs are happening, or here's this projection. And it's kind of hard because it's not stable. I think the future, but I do think the independent space in the independent audio space is going to play a role in stabilizing. Whether like what Rux was saying, like you have these really obscure creative projects. I always look at everything like a pendulum. So like when it swings one way, eventually it's going to swing back. Even like in audience behavior, like, we're starting to see that a little bit, right? We're seeing that with people getting flip phones instead of having instead of smartphones. We're starting to see people, the influx in vinyl versus, and going back to the analog way of listening to music versus the digital. So we're going to keep seeing like this thing swaying back and forth. But, right now, I think the independent audio side is going to be the strong foundation of the industry, no matter which direction it goes. And I can't give a definitive vision of what I see. I can only focus on what I'm trying to do with my community and the other joint communities around me that want to collaborate, and just make sure that either way we're prepared for either direction it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see us learn some lessons from this decade, or however long it was, maybe 15 years, right, of this influx of cash, and where we stand on that, and do, if whenever the tech bros decide that they need to, or angel investors, they want to like throw some of their extra millions at podcasting, that we are better prepared about what our terms and standards and what we're willing to negotiate and not. I mean, you mentioned IP rights, Corey, earlier, and I mean, so many of us learn about that the hard way. Like, you sign the contract. What does the contract say? Like, I think I would like to see us just kind of in connection with AIR, an organization Corey and I are both on the board of, become conscious and aware of our rights as individual producers, as collectives, so that we can negotiate better terms for ourselves. I don't think we're going to have another period like the podcasting boom, but it'll be something else. And maybe there'll be video thrown in, or maybe there'll be like AI chips implanted in your brain. I don't know. But I definitely, I think like many of us have learned some lessons over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, it's through really challenging times like this one where we identify where we stand and what we want to negotiate or not along the way.
I want to just throw. I do have a vision. I think podcasting is going to be part of a bigger multimedia experience as more virtual and augmented reality tools start to become prevalent as well. I even have an idea I'm working on, but I can't talk about that here. But I think that's where we're going to see podcast. Well, the audio, I'm going to say, because it might not just be in the form of a podcast. It might be a different type of audio experience as well. But I see it like I'm seeing like maybe like, I'm not going to say AI. I'm talking more like the augmented reality, the virtual, as the devices become smaller, more wearable tech. We're going to see opportunities there for audio content in those spaces.
What are you guys' thoughts on like live events becoming more popular as people have that more sense of like, hey, I want something more real, I want something more tangible, and like people meeting audiences, like face to face and in the same room versus just hearing us in like between your ears.
I don't want to keep occupying, but I think I think that too is a part of the future of podcasting is the fan experience. No matter, even I'm going to use the music industry. Touring is where most artists make their money, and it's where they connect directly with their their audiences, and the audiences are willing to pay. As we see with some artists, a huge amount of money just to come see you for 45 minutes or for an hour to play some of your the favorite songs. I'm working on an idea for that too next year. But I think podcasts. We always talk about how podcasters have influence with their audience, and it's the connection, right? What better way to add to better connect with your audience than to actually meet them in person and that be able to for them to be able to say, take a picture with you and create that memory with them, because I think that's the most organic type of marketing you could ever get from somebody, is that they meet you. I was a huge fan of Black Thought, the rapper, until I met him. You can make or break somebody in that capacity too. But I think I've gone to a couple of live events here in New York City. Somebody's asked me to come to see their favorite podcaster, and guess what happens? I subscribe. I start listening to it. So, yeah, Shirley, I got a Joseph. Joseph, I got a story. I'll talk to you about that. But I think that's the other evolution of podcasting, is incorporating the fan experience in touring and or some form of kind of interactive live engagement with a podcast or audio professional. Because I don't think it's just. I think you could do it with documentaries. I think you could do that with anything if you provide the right experience.
I also want to say, as an event planner, that for anybody who is planning a live event, it doesn't have to be this grand execution. A live event could be a picnic in the park. It's connecting with the audience, I think, is the most important thing, and that should be the driving factor. Budget comes next. Budget is going to dictate how big of a space, how many people, what you can offer. But remember that the point is to connect as opposed to dazzle.
Tamar, any live Lonely Palette tours coming up your way?
Probably not. Although, if you ever find me at a museum, you won't be able to shut me up. Yeah, I mean, I think, just to answer the question about kind of where are we going with all of this, Paula, I think you're right on the money. I think, video is going to smush into audio, and people are going to think that, it's like, if people are going to realize, oh, hey, that's just film. Or I guess what somebody put in the comments, like, cable access from the 80s, like watching people talk is surprisingly compelling, but listening to them talk, you can do more stuff while you're doing it. And I don't think we should lose sight of that it's actually a lot more convenient to listen to a podcast than to watch it. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, I don't know where this drive is coming from to pivot towards video, but eventually it's going to expand and contract all over again. And one thing that has never gone away is the power of radio. It was around before video, and it had this incredible renaissance, and it will again. Might not be anytime soon, but I think we still have to make sure that we put energy into keeping the quality of the audio up. You know, the audio should not kind of like fall to the level of that cable access video. And people will realize that there's a lot more that you can do with audio, that our audiences got used to for a while before everything kind of started. I don't know, the quality started suffering quite a bit. So I think we need to keep high production values there.
Absolutely. Casper, I'm gonna, I know we went a little over time. I'm so sorry about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around. And this was a great conversation. And I'm sure we could talk for many more hours. But this is, a great start. And, we can continue to have these conversations. So, like I said, I dropped a bunch of links to all the collectives and groups for each panelist. So if you are interested in learning more or getting involved, please feel free to follow up with them. And I will send a recording once it's uploaded. I'll send a follow-up email with all that information. And thanks again for everyone, especially the panelists, for taking the time out of your day and to share some insights and, just talk about your perspectives. But thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.